The last thing I remember after that was briefly being barely conscious for 1 second as he was loading me into a car trunk, and then it went to black once again. When I woke up, I was in what looked like some kind of hole. My hands were tied behind my back. There was sharp metal stuff all around me, and from what I could see above the hole, there was what looked to be a giant metal mallet above me. Underneath my feet was something that seemed like it was supposed to propel me upwards whenever it was activated. Overall, I was in a tight space and it was difficult to get out. I tried to think of a way to get out, but I couldn't think of anything at that moment. Then, I heard a whirring sound as lights came on above me and the architect spoke. Good evening, Plainview. Welcome to our grand finale. I could feel something unhinged and maniacal in his voice, different than the calculating and flat tone he usually used. He was excited. He had waited for this for a long, long time, and nobody was gonna get in his way. I listened with dread to hear what he would say next, and sure enough, he began his speech for the evening. You didn't know this, but for the longest time, there has been a mole poking his nose into my affairs, trying to find out who I am, even trying to stop me. Now, it didn't take a genius to figure out who he was talking about, but pretty soon, there would be no question. His name is Greg Heffley, and wouldn't you know it, he was best friends with Rowley Jefferson, who donated to the Megaplex. Imagine what skeletons he has hiding in his closet, eh? If you ever been to a Chuck E. Cheese as a kid, you might remember playing a game called Whack-A-Mole. In this game, the moles pop out of their little holes and you whack them with your mallets so they go back down. Personally, my mother never let me go to Chuck E. Cheese growing up, so I've never played it. But that's what we are going to do tonight. We are going to whack the mole. Whack, whack, whack him until he dies. Then the architect started laughing maniacally, and it was one of the most horrifying laughs I had ever heard in my life. I frantically tried to find a way out of my trap, and at first, it was to no avail. Then, I felt a surge of pain from one of the sharp metal things, no doubt added there to make my torment extra unbearable. And that's when I got an idea. I grated my restraints against the sharp metal stuff. I did this with panic and haste, as I knew I only had so much time before the plate underneath me shot me up to my huge metal mallet-shaped grave. I also did this quietly and in secret, as I didn't want the architect catching on. Eventually, I untied my bonds, and I waited for the plate to shoot me upwards. Then, I would dart out of the hole at the right moment, right before the mallet came down on me, and escape. Eventually, the plate did just that, and at the right moment, when I was high enough to get out of the hole, but right before the mallet came down, I scrambled out of there and narrowly avoided meeting a sticky and splatty end at the hands of a giant metal mallet. As soon as I got out of there, I ran as fast as I could. I could hear the architect screaming and yelling with rage. I couldn't even understand what he was saying because it was so nonsensical, if he was even saying anything at all, but I could hear items being thrown around. I sprinted out of the room and through the hallway, and I knew that the architect would be looking for me, so I looked for somewhere to hide. Eventually, I found a door to a room with a desk, so I ran in there, shut the door behind me, and hid under the desk. I tried to think of what to do. I observed my surroundings, a dark and dingy basement area. There was no doubt Bryce, Kevin, and Rowley were being held in some other rooms, but where? Then, I heard something in the room. I carefully peeked from under the desk to see what it was, and I saw an etch-a-sketch lying on the floor, its canvas propped to face me. Then, it began writing by itself, and when the writing was finished, it said, "Can you see my writing?" I nodded my head. It wrote again. "I can help you find them." It erased by itself and then wrote again. "I will draw a map of the basement layout. I will show you each room in which they are being kept in. I will show you where you are. Follow my lead. When you get to a room, I will open a door for you. Be careful." Then, the entire schematics of this basement were drawn on the etch-a-sketch. I said thanks, and then, out of curiosity, asked my mysterious aide, "Who are you?" Right on cue, it responded by writing in the bottom right-hand corner of the etch-a-sketch, "Shrug." Something about the fact that my friend was watching over me even after death warmed my heart, but I didn't have time to dwell on that. Mere seconds meant the difference between life and death for Rowley, Bryce, and Kevin. I picked up the etch a sketch with the map still drawn on it and snuck through the hallway to find Rowley and others. The rooms each of them were being held in were marked with a letter for their names. R for the room Rowley was in, B for the room Bryce was in, and K for the room Kevin was in. Bryce and Kevin were in the same room, and it was the one closest to me, so I figured I'd kill two birds with one stone and then come for Rowley. I snuck through the walls on the lookout for the architect or Manny, and eventually I came across the door to where the map said the room holding Bryce and Kevin was. Sure enough, the door to the room opened by itself, or more accurately, by Shirag, and I stepped inside. In the middle of the room was a throne, and in the throne sat Bryce, handcuffed by restraints fastened into the throne's armrests. He had an apple gag in his mouth like a pig, and on his head he wore a crown with the words King of Lies engraved into it. To the left of Bryce hung Kevin Winton, and behind him was a giant metal knife prepared to stab him at any moment. I looked around the room to see if there was any controls that could release them or anything I could free them with. To the right of Bryce was a table with an axe laying atop it with the words, "To taste the head of the king." To taste the head of the king engraved on it. Bryce read that twice. I used the edge of the axe to first cut off the chains of Kevin Winton and then cut open his restraints, since he was the one who seemed to be in the most immediate anger. Once I freed him, I used the edge of the axe to separate Bryce's restraints from the armrest of his throne, and Bryce was freed. But just then, another door, different than the one I went through, burst open, and the architect came through, screaming in rage. Bryce shoved me to the ground as he ran to the door. Bruh, this is Bryce guy. I went through before he slammed it shut behind him. Kevin, however, seemed a lot more open to working with me. The architect was in a blind rage, so it was easier to outsmart him by running around the room in circles. When the time was right, running through the door he went through and slamming it shut behind him. I still had the axe with me, along with the etch-a-sketch, which was a lifesaver, because it wasn't long before the architect burst through the door running after us. As he ran towards us, I whacked him across the head with the axe and he fell to the floor, out cold. Kevin asked me if I knew how to get out of there. I told him I had the schematics and he said that it was time to use them and get the F out of there. I said that there was still someone here and that we needed to get them before we left the basement, and he said I was flipping insane. I said we were getting Rowley whether he liked it or not, and he seemed to reluctantly give up and agree. But then, without warning, he kicked me in the gut and grabbed my etch-a-sketch and axe. As he ran off, he said that if I wanted to be a bleeding heart, then that's my choice, but that in the end, the sharks are the ones who survive, and the fish end up as seafood. But shark or fish, he wouldn't make it very far before he ended up being levitated into the air, dropping the axe and etch-a-sketch as this happened. What's happening? Help! Help! Please, I'm sorry, help! Then Kevin's head was torn off, his blood gushing like a fountain, and his limp and lifeless body fell to the floor. Then, Manny appeared. They say you ought to keep your head in the game, eh, Bobby? I ran in the opposite direction to get away from Manny, but that only seemed to give him more fuel. Oh, I love a game of tag. I ran as fast as I could, and eventually, I found a door that led to some room and ran through it. I slammed the door shut behind me, and it seemed like that I had gone away from Manny, or maybe that's just what he wanted me to think. I looked around, and I saw that I was in a control room. There were monitors for every room we were being held in, including mine, Bryce, and Kevin's, and a giant piggy bank. I saw one monitor with Rowley crammed up in some dark, tight space. At first, I had no idea where Rowley was supposed to be other than some cramped, tight space. But then, I saw an unlit fire pit under the giant piggy bank, and I put two and two together. I remember learning about the brazen bull in history during high school, a torture and execution method so cruel and inhumane that legends say after the man who designed it presented it to the emperor of ancient Greece at the time, he had him thrown into the bull and burned alive inside it until he was half dead, then thrown into the ocean. It burned you alive, not with fire, but with the hot metal surrounding you. And as you screamed from the inside, the metal made a sound to those observing like that of a bull. In front of the monitor were the controls, buttons on the categories for every trap I had seen used to kill untortured architects' targets. They were listed by name. There was Jace, Trent, Jerome, Ned, one for my own torture trap, Kevin, Bryce, and finally, Rowley. Under Rowley's category were two buttons. One I was sure to activate the device, the other I didn't know the purpose of at first. But then I noticed a hatch on the top of the giant piggy bank, so I figured it was to open the hatch and in turn freeing Rowley. The only problem was I didn't know which was which. I tried to take a guess, but there was really no indication as to which did which. Only the architect knew, and someone told me he wasn't too keen on helping me out. Eventually, I just decided to just hope for the best, and with my fingers crossed, I pressed the button. The hatch of the giant piggy bank opened. Carefully, Rowley crawled out, confused, shaken, scared, and probably tired. He looked around the room, maybe to see if there was anybody who could help him, maybe to make sure that there was nobody to hurt him. Then, I noticed a speaker on the controls for the intercom, so I turned that on and asked Rowley if he could hear me. Greg? Is that you? What's going on? I told him that I was here to help. I said that I would explain everything once I made sure he was out of there and safe. But for the time being, I told him to stay where he was so that I could come and find him. Wait, my son! He took my son too! Do you know where my son is, Greg? I told him that I tried to find his son, but for the time being to stay where he was so that he would be safe. I said to lock the door if he could, and if that wasn't an option, I suggested that he barricaded the door with whatever he could find. I didn't have my Etch-a-Sketch with me anymore after Kevin took it from me, so I looked around the room for a map or something I could use to find out where in the basement this control room was at. As I was looking, I saw two pieces of paper lying on the floor. I picked them up and started reading, and I got a pretty good idea of the architect slash Maddox salesman's story. Yeah, this is going to be hard to read. I hate them, I hate them, I hate them. They stole my ideas, my designs, my work. They took credit for something that was never theirs. The Megaplex was my idea, my brainchild. I designed it, conceptualized it, I put it onto paper and into blueprints. I presented it to Kevin Winton and he seemed to like it. I was glad they seemed to like my idea. But days later, they would announce the Plainview Megaplex, and Kevin and Bryce claimed it as their own. They said they designed it, they conceptualized it, which was not true. I designed it, I conceptualized it, I put it onto the blueprints. It was my idea, not theirs. I confronted Winton about it, and he denied it. He acted like he had no idea what I was talking about. He acted like we never had a conversation where I pitched the Megaplex to him. He said he didn't even know who I was. He called me a liar and said I was trying to take credit for his invention. I snapped, I attacked him, and they called security. They restrained me, and half an hour later, I was informed that my employment at the company was terminated. Then, they had me taken away to the mental hospital where I was tortured for months on and with shock therapy. Now, I see them on TV claiming that my idea is theirs, lying to everyone without a shred of care or shame. I hate them, I hate them. My deceased mother appeared to me last night. I began to get the feeling that something wasn't right, and I soon realized that whatever it was that I was talking to, it wasn't my mother. I confronted it on that, and it told me that I was quite perceptive. The demon told me that it appeared to me in the form of my mother so that I would be comfortable speaking to it. I asked it what it wanted, and the demon said that it knew of the injustices done to me by Bryce and his higher-ups. The demon offered me revenge. It promised me the power to take retribution against Bryce and all those in his circle who wronged me. In return, it asked that I allowed it to use my body as a vessel. It also asks of me that I give it to the families of those who I kill as a sacrifice. The demon said that I may have the souls of the guilty, while it will have the souls of the innocent. I gladly accepted this deal. I will at last get revenge on Bryce Anderson. I will at last make all who wronged me, all who stole from me, and took credit for my idea pay. I didn't realize where Rowley's son might be. I hoped that it wasn't too late, that the architect or Manny hadn't already killed him. Then, I heard a tapping sound, and when I turned to the direction of where the sound came from, I saw a door, different to the one I'd come in from. Then, the door opened by itself, and behind a door was a staircase going downwards. It was dark, so I couldn't see what was going on down there. But I'm pretty sure Shrug wanted me to go down there. I did, and when I got to the bottom, I was greeted by something truly horrifying. All across the floor lay the severed heads and bodies, parts of women and children surrounded by candles. It looked like the scene of some sort of draconian satanic ritual. The families of the higher ups, no doubt their innocent blood Manny required. But why? For what horrific purpose could Manny possibly need these innocent family members killed for other than his own sadistic amusement? Then, I saw something move in the back of the room. Carefully, I stepped forward and I got a good look at what or who it was. It was Rowley's son. I said hi and I carefully approached him. I slowly walked through the sea of severed heads and body parts, and as I did, I told him that I was here to help and that everything was going to be okay. I'm not sure how much of the last part I believed, but hopefully it helped reassure Robert. I told Robert that I knew where his dad was and that I was going to help him find him. He said that the bad man kidnapped him and his dad and that he woke up here with all the dead people. I told him that I was gonna make sure that he was okay. I told him that he needed to trust me, and I asked him if he could do that. He nodded his head yes, and I took his hand and led him to a door in the back area of this room, which thankfully meant we didn't have to walk through that pile of severed heads and body parts. But before we could even do that, the door locked by itself and all the candles blew out. Then, the candles started lighting up again by themselves one by one, and as they did, I felt an evil presence envelop the room. I stepped in front of Rowley's son to shield him, and I could tell that he could feel the presence and was getting really scared. Then, Manny appeared in front of me.